Video calls are a great way to communicate with people currently, but it's important that you take them seriously as you would a face-to-face meeting. So you wouldn't turn up in a t-shirt or a singlet and shorts to a face-to-face sales meeting. So don't attend a Zoom meeting in the same way. So think about the Zoom meeting in exactly the same way. You want to make sure that you've got good eye contact with the person, you look professional, and you're well lit, and that the background, the area that you're sitting in is professional, represents what your brand is all about. So that when you have that initial conversation with a sales prospect, they're looking at you and getting the professionalism of you and of your company from that image. And so you've got to work hard in many ways to make sure that you can get your empathy and your professionalism and everything across. But things like making sure that the camera is at eye level, that you're not moving around a room and causing the background to move, which would make the other person attending the meeting they'd find it very difficult. Equally, don't have a Zoom meeting on your phone. The image is too unstable. It's more likely that the phone might fall over halfway through the meeting. It just doesn't give a professional image. Do it on your computer. Try to be off Wi-Fi if you can. Try to be on Ethernet or internet. And basically keep that professionalism in the appearance. Then the other thing is have a set agenda, whether you share that with the prospect or not, have a set agenda and make sure it's question-based. Asking good questions to find out about their situation. You're not there, you don't have visual aids that you can share with a prospect on a Zoom meeting or an online meeting. So you have to run the meeting slightly differently. You need to be able to send them information after the meeting rather than necessarily share it on the meeting in the same way. But you need to also make sure you're asking really good questions and running the meeting other than that very much in the same way as you would face-to-face. I think today people are quite happy to have a bit of a social chat on these meetings, which is great for rapport building. People aren't running at 100 miles an hour. They're not thinking, oh, I've got to finish this meeting and get on to the next one. They will spend a little bit more time with you. That's a great opportunity to build some rapport with the prospect and then to run a very good meeting off the back of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. You know what, I think that this is actually a really good opportunity for us to develop the way that we sell as individual contributors and people who bring revenue into a business. And I think that there's most of what Richard said there I agree with. There are a couple of things that I see differently. I'm going to touch on those first. The first thing is that I'm in a very different situation in so much as the only place I can get quiet within the house that I live in with 2 kids and a dog and everything else within the house is in my 4-year-old's bedroom. So from a professional background perspective, I don't necessarily have, as you can see, I don't necessarily have that brilliant opportunity to be in a professional space with a nice office and a desk and that sort of stuff. And if anything, that's worked in my favor in a number of conversations that I've had, because I've been able to, I think to Richard's point, been able to connect with people on a bit more of an authentic level. I can, I talk to them about my story, and maybe in a normal sales meeting, you wouldn't get into your kids and your family and the dog and all that sort of stuff. And I've spent the first 10 minutes talking about that and finding out about their family and their setup and talking about how lockdown is for them. And as Richard said, building a lot more rapport with them. So I think that, the ideal scenario is that you've got a nice professional setup that looks great. And I've seen lots of people with the old pull-up banner in the background and a really good, almost as if it's their purpose-built office at home. And kudos to them and very lucky to them if they've got the space and the area to do that. Unfortunately, some of us have to sort of do in a very different environment. And I think it's about making the most of the situation that you're in. So, if you've got a great technology set up and you can be plugged into the internet and you've got professional cameras and all that kind of stuff, great. If you haven't, it's still true that the way that you connect with somebody on a human level is going to be the impact or the biggest impacting factor over whether you're able to get a good outcome out of that sales call or not. So I think it's important to remember that, as Richard said, it's vital you work hard on your sales skills and how you're selling. So I would say bring the barriers down, talk about personal. At the moment, people are happy to have that conversation and they are happy to talk about personal things and their current situation at home, lockdown and all that sort of stuff. So do it, make the most of that. Don't rush through that rapport building part of the call because it's critical. One of the key things for me is where you position your camera. So eye contact. I think we're all guilty of tending to look at ourselves in the screen rather than looking at the camera. And remember that the person you're looking at, if they're looking at you, is ultimately looking at your eyes through your camera. So I've seen people doing sales meetings like this, so they're looking at their camera over here and talking to you, but there's a problem, right? Because you're not addressing me. And we've already lost a high percentage of the visual cues and the body language cues that we would get in a sales meeting that allow us to connect and understand each other. So let's at least try and get some of those back by developing the closest possible thing that we can to eye contact. But for me, I think Richard's most important point there was the agenda. Having a clear agenda, knowing how you're setting out to do that meeting. The reality is that good salespeople probably should have been practicing video sales meetings a long time ago. So it shouldn't be a surprise or a new thing. But if it is, like anything that's new, you should be practicing it first. You know, you wouldn't go and make a sales call for the first time without practicing it internally, doing some kind of mock call or doing some kind of training internally. Why should this be any different? So just jumping on a sales call virtually and hoping for the best is not the right way to go. Practicing it, running through it, knowing exactly how you're going to approach that meeting is the key. So there's a lot of things to think about, but I think ultimately, you know, you need to be preparing for it in the same way as you would a face-to-face, and treating it just as importantly. You might just be adapting your approach.
I think that's really good advice. There's one other thing I would like to add is just to remember, especially if there are 2 or 3 people on the call, that you're always on camera. So just because the other 2 people are talking doesn't mean that they can't see you. So if you start doing things in the background that are not conducive with the meeting, they can see you. And always remember to smile.